It's very saddening. To see any of these civilian deaths is terribly saddening.
We condemn strongly the rocket attacks.
Egypt have encouraged that, and Israel has accepted that ceasefire proposal. Only Hamas now needs to make the decision.
Good evening. You're watching I-24 News. I'm Meredith Ross, and this is day 15 of Operation Protective Edge. The focus of the operation is slowly shifting to the diplomatic arena, where efforts to forge a ceasefire are growing, so far without any visible sign of success. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is in Israel, where he met today with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Cairo on the same quest for a truce. Meanwhile, the fighting is continuing. By early evening local time, Hamas had fired 41 rockets at Israel, 11 of which were intercepted by the Iron Dome anti-missile system. Another Israeli soldier was killed this morning, bringing to 27 the number of soldiers killed in the fighting so far, and to 30 the number of Israelis killed since the operation began. The question remains unanswered of what happened to an Israeli soldier still missing from Sunday's fighting. Hamas said he is a prisoner, while Israel says he is considered missing in action. Hamas leadership abroad announced today that the swap deal for the soldier's body will be a separate deal from the ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, a rocket which landed near Ben Gurion International Airport has led the Federal Aviation Authority to forbid U.S. airlines from flying to Israel for at least 24 hours. And joining me in the studio are now a retired Brigadier General Relik Shafir, the former commander of the Tel Nof Air Base. Thank you very much for being with us today.
A pleasure.
And Dan Gillerman, Israel's former ambassador to the United Nations. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Now, we will start with you, Mr. Ambassador. The story of the missing soldier. What's the plan now on Israel's side? How does Israel deal with a situation like this?
Well, as you can imagine, this is a very delicate situation. And I think at the moment, the less said about it, the better. I'm not sure we know all the details. There's a shroud of mystery sort of around this whole event. I think that it's a horrible event, and we are facing a horrific and cruel and ruthless enemy. And we don't want to give them any ideas, and we don't want to create, a situation which may be harmful and damaging to the soldier or to his family. So we're very worried about it. It is a very unfortunate and sad and horrific turn of events, but we'll have to wait and see how this unfolds.
Absolutely. And turning more to the diplomatic side, Secretary Kerry held meetings in Cairo. Does the U.S. have much leverage here?
I think the U.S. today has less leverage, not just in Israel, but in the region than it ever had before. I think the U.S. has made some serious mistakes in its foreign policy. I think it has created, unfortunately, a situation where at least the perception is of a weak America that is trying to disengage from the region, and an America whose allies feel they cannot rely on it, and whose enemies feel they can get away with murder. However, I think that Secretary Kerry genuinely wants to bring an end to this confrontation. I believe President Obama does as well. And they do have, maybe for the first time, an unprecedented coalition of partners who could be very helpful to them in doing so, not only in Europe and in the rest of the world, but in the region. Egypt is intent on bringing an end to it. I think the Saudis and much of the Gulf countries feel the same way. So while America may not have the leverage it had before, it does have allies together with whom it can bring an end to this. But I want to stress, and maybe we'll get to that later, but that just a ceasefire is certainly not enough. We cannot just stop and hope that everything will be okay. Doing that will be like putting a Band-Aid on a tumor. We have to come out of this. When I say we, it's mainly Israel, with a totally new situation in the region, and with an understanding that what we've witnessed and the arms and rockets and tunnels that Hamas has amassed will not once again be able to serve them in their very destructive ways. So I think we have a chance to come out of this with a much broader agreement, which will bring about a totally new situation. I think this is what we have to aim for, not just a ceasefire. Just a ceasefire is not enough.
This is what many people are saying, that you really need to get to the root of the problem. And military-wise, what needs to be done in order to secure the region?
There is no way militarily to secure the region. And as you know, military use is an extension of the diplomacy, of statesmanship. And the less you use statesmanship, the less brinkmanship or less allies you make in peacetime or between wars, the more difficult it becomes in wartime. So I think there's an interesting coalition that is built between Israel, Abu Mazen, and Egypt, where the interests of the three parties coalesce into a state where we all have the same interest, which is make Hamas weaker and bring some kind of truce that they will have to withdraw their weapons, have to cut off their weapons. There is no military solution to this. There are 1.8 million Palestinians in Gaza, and even if we take out the last Hamas fighter, we have not taken out their despair and their lack of hope. And as long as there's no hope and there's despair, then there'll be trouble coming out of there and coming out of the West Bank. So obviously the military force, once we've used it and gone in with boots on the ground, we cannot go back. You get on the pitch, you start the game, you can't call it off. So you're trapped into a situation where you have to keep carrying on and eat away the Hamas power so that they are under siege in a way. And this is what we're going to see in the next few days as the ground forces advance very slowly with a kind of a mask of air power and destroy more and more of the Hamas strong posts and create pressure on the Hamas. But to your question, is it solvable militarily? No.
No. And you just said it's important for Hamas to disarm. But we're hearing that the EU foreign minister did say that the Hamas must be disarmed. What do you make of this?
Well, I think there's a worldwide realization. I think that most of the world, except maybe for Iran, whose proxy Hamas basically is, and the Qataris, who are always enjoying being the bad guys of the region, except for those two, everybody understands that this situation cannot go on and that Hamas is a horrific, brutal, ruthless terrorist organization. I think most countries understand that no country in the world would have waited as long as Israel did to react to being rained with thousands of rockets over its cities and towns. And I think most of the world also understands the difference. I mean, there is no symmetry here. This is not a war between two equal parties. It is a war between a democratic state that is trying to defend its citizens and a terror organization that is trying to kill women and children. You know, we've developed the Iron Dome in order to protect our women and children, and Hamas has developed rockets in order to kill our women and children. And not only that, but they are holding, and you know, Relic said rightly, there's 1.8 citizens in Gaza. I'm sure many of them, all they want is their dignity back, their life back, their education, their kids. I don't think anybody really wants to raise their kids to be a suicide bomber. But they are being held hostage by their own people. They're being, you know, made to to go to sleep with rockets, whether it's in mosques or in hospitals or in private homes. And, you know, if you go to sleep with a missile, don't be surprised if you don't wake up in the morning. So I think that there is a realization worldwide today that Hamas must be disarmed. And I think that there's also a model that can be followed, and that is what happened in Syria. What we had in Syria was most of the world wanting to punish Bashar al-Assad, but realizing at the same time that maybe a weakened Assad without chemical weapons is better for them than any of those extremist gangs who were trying to overthrow him.
And we're seeing similarities in the Gaza
I think there's a
Strip.
similarity here. I think most people, maybe including the Israeli government, don't necessarily want to oust Hamas, to demolish Hamas, to wipe them out. A, I'm not sure it's possible. B, we don't know who will come in their place. But a weakened Hamas without missiles, maybe Egypt can become the custodian or the guarantor of those missiles, and without tunnels, and at the same time, a Hamas which will get reconstruction from the rest of the world. Because I think both things go together. We have, to a great extent, destroyed Gaza, but I think that we will be the first to cry out and to ask for a reconstruction of Gaza, because Gaza can be made into a better place, and if it's a better place and the people there have something to lose, we will be better off too.
And we will revisit this conversation, but we do go now live to the Gaza border, where our reporter Ellie Hockenberg is standing by. Good evening, Ellie. What's the latest from that area?
Well, Meredith, as the ceasefire agreement is not really around the corner, the IDF activity inside the Gaza Strip is gaining more and more progress, and there is a satisfaction in the Israeli security establishment from the achievement reached by now, especially in all regarding to the underground terror infrastructure. And we have to bear in mind that when the IDF is inside the Gaza Strip, it constantly collects more and more intelligence, more and more information that it hadn't necessarily had before this operation. So the ground activity exposing more and more underground tunnels, rocket launchers and other ammunition, as well as collecting more intelligence, is gaining progress. But the preparations outside of the Gaza Strip, along the Israeli-Gaza border in Israeli territories, is also on very high alert following the several infiltration attempts into Israeli territories. So we have a massive amount of forces outside the border, scanning and patrolling the area all during the day in order to prevent such an attempt. And there also a growing fear that there will be escalation in tensions in other areas across Israel, as we've seen yesterday in the West Bank. So the security forces keeps on their massive efforts in the Gaza Strip, along the border, and in other places in Israel. And you know, Meredith, one of the challenges is to deal with the not always good news that are coming following this operation, such as the missing soldiers and killed soldiers. But the forces here on the ground are keeping the moral high, very determined to keep up the good work, and we can expect several more days of massive activity inside the Gaza Strip, at least until any sign from the diplomacy level will get here, Meredith, and we will of course keep you updated with any development from here.
Ellie Hockenberg, thank you for these updates. And we go now live to our reporter Jonathan Regev, standing by in the city of Ashkelon that has seen heavy rocket fire throughout the conflict. Jonathan, what's the latest?
Yes, Meredith. Well, this day in Ashkelon has been rather quiet. 2 sirens in the morning, and we are now right outside the Ashkelon cemetery, where the funeral of Jordan Ben Simon has just ended. Jordan Ben Simon, native of France, a lone soldier. But the pictures here in Ashkelon, pretty much the same as we've seen last night in Haifa with the funeral of Sean Carmeli. He came from America, lone soldier. 20,000 people came to Haifa last night to his funeral, and today the same story in Ashkelon. About 5,000 people came to the funeral of Jordan Ben Simon here in Ashkelon, despite the danger. Let's remember, we're merely 10 kilometers away from the Gaza Strip, yet people came here despite not knowing Jordan Ben Simon or his family, but to make a statement. He may be defined as a lone soldier, but he's not a lone soldier. The whole country is standing behind him, and we've seen here people, French-speaking, non-French-speaking, secular, religious, the whole Israeli society, basically people representing the whole Israeli society, came into Ashkelon to pay the last respect for a fallen soldier.
Jonathan, thank you very much for these updates. And Redlik, we heard our correspondent Ellie Hockenberg on the Gaza border just talking about the military advantage of having troops on the ground, of the intelligence they're collecting every day, the discoveries of tunnels and weapons caches. So is there value in this? Is it in Israel's best interest to carry out an expansive operation?
Of course, once you start an operation to discover the tunnels, you need to dismantle each and every one of them, because we do not have a system to, at least at this time, to discover the tunnels that are dug. So even if we withdraw, they can go back to digging tunnels. So we need to make sure that we've destroyed each and every one of them, because we've seen their capabilities, which I think are beyond what we all imagined is possible. And this is maybe one of the big surprises they were able to pull during this conflict, one of their major weapon systems. So once you've started the job, you need to finish it. And what's the next move? Do we withdraw back before there's a ceasefire? This is, as we said before, you get on the pitch and the game starts, you just can't walk off. So you need to eat away and make sure you put enough pressure on Hamas so that even though they can claim, and they certainly can claim that they have some success. They put 5 million Israelis in shelters, running back and forth for, it's 15 days now. They've been able to infiltrate into Israel. The rockets haven't been very successful, but they have a psychological effect, and so they can claim that they have won. So it's a question of psyching the story. Let me take us back about 40 years. Sadat, when the Egyptians crossed the tunnel, was able to put a flag in the Israeli side of the Suez Canal. And even though our soldiers were quite close to Cairo on one side and to Damascus on the other side,
this was the Yom Kippur War in 1973.
They, even though militarily it was obvious that we have won, but they celebrate the 6th of October every year as the big victory. That allowed them to make a move, and the peace move that was unthinkable before that, and we've had peace with them for the last 40 years, and look at the coalescing interests at this time. So if the Hamas decide that they've won the war, as far as they're concerned, they can present that what Dani said before, the refurbishment and maybe the rebuilding of Gaza in lieu of their weapons. I'm not sure they're going to give up the weapons that fast, but some kind of a move that takes them out from the corner where they were, with Israel pressing them, the Egyptians pressing them, and Mahmoud Abbas pressing them by not paying the officials. They were able to get out of that one, and they will have to give up the weapons. So a ray of hope, some dignity. They've done something. I think that allows that in a few days they'll be able to come to a ceasefire.
And you mentioned the next move. I mean, what is the next move diplomatically, considering that the death toll is just mounting in Gaza?
Well, we're seeing a lot of diplomatic activity. We've just seen Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the UN here. We're expecting John Kerry to come. Mahmoud Abbas is very busy, and he's been to Cairo, and he's going back and forth. So there is a lot of activity. The question is, where does that activity lead? I think most people felt that John Kerry and Ban Ki-moon would not make the effort and would not make the journey if they hadn't already some kind of ceasefire agreement in place. It turns out that they don't. They don't have an agreement in place, also because Hamas has not agreed to an agreement, and also because I think Israel has gained that worldwide legitimacy which it never had before.
Right.
I think a lot of it is due to the fact that Israel accepted, first of all, showed a lot of restraint for 10 days. No other country in the world would wait 10 seconds. Just imagine, you're from Chicago.
Yes,
imagine Chicago being shelled by rockets. How long would the U.S. wait?
What many pro-Israel campaigns are saying
from Canada
on social media as well. But staying with, we do need to go to the next report. I'm sorry to interrupt, but staying with diplomacy, as Operation Protective Edge is about to conclude its 15th day, intensive efforts are underway to bring about a ceasefire. So far, however, with little sign of success. More in our next report.
Despite the intensive diplomatic efforts, no ceasefire to end the fighting in Gaza is in sight. But the attempts are continuing, spread headed by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and US Secretary of State John Kerry. Ban arrived in Israel Tuesday and met almost immediately with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli leader gave no hint he is considering bringing Operation Protective Edge to a halt, and instead compared Hamas to such extremist groups as Al-Qaeda and ISIL.
And therefore, in the face of such extremism, in the face of such violence, in the face of such terror, Israel has no option but to defend itself. And this is what we are doing, as is our right. We have sought to end this from the start with ceasefires, and as I told you, they refused and they continued. And we will do what we need to do to defend ourselves.
Ban said no country would tolerate rocket attacks, but also urged the parties to stop fighting and start talking.
The United Nations position is clear. We condemn strongly the rocket attacks. These must stop immediately. We condemn the use of civilian sites, schools, hospitals, and other civilian facilities for military purposes. No country would accept the rockets raining down on its territory. And all countries and parties have an international obligation to protect civilians.
Earlier today, the chances of reaching a ceasefire appeared somewhat firmer. Kerry held a series of talks in Cairo with Ban Ki-moon, Arab League Secretary General Nabil al-Arabi, and Egyptian Foreign Minister Samah Shoukry.
And once a ceasefire has been reached, we are certainly ready to discuss and work through the incredibly complicated underlying issues that have led to this crisis.
This is of course not the final chords of the attempts to force a ceasefire. According to reports, a new initiative that combines the Egyptian truce proposal and elements from the Qatari one will be presented soon. But as fighting continues and the already fierce violence intensifies, it is difficult to see how the situation could revert to what it was before July 8.
And joining us now in studio is Reserve Major General Yaakov Amidror, Israel's former National Security Advisor. Thank you very much for being here. Now, obviously, we've been discussing this operation at length. What do you think is the end goal of this operation on Israel's side?
There are two separate elements in this operation. One is the land operation, and it's a very limited goal. It's to find, identify, and blow the tunnels. That's all. Not to clean the strip, not to eliminate the launchers and so on. The other one is to convince the Hamas leaders that every day they are losing more and more, and at the end they will have, it's their interest to have quiet for quiet. Otherwise, we will continue to blow their infrastructure, to kill their people inside Gaza. We are going after the members of Hamas in Gaza, and we try to eliminate them. So this is two different issues. One is very, very limited and defined, and it will take some days before it will be ended. And I hope that at the end of this process, Hamas will not have any more the ability to infiltrate into Israeli tunnels.
And just as an update to our viewers, sirens are currently being heard in the southern cities of Ashdod and Ashkelon at this moment. But I wanted to ask you, some cabinet ministers recently have been calling for a partial or full reconquering of Gaza, and I know that you've shared this sentiment before. What do you feel is right?
I didn't share the sentiments. What I said that there are only two options. One is to conquer Gaza, and by that to eliminate the ability, not the will, the ability of Hamas to launch rockets into Israel. The other one is to have a ceasefire without conquering Gaza, and then the ability will be there, and maybe we will deter them from implement their capabilities. But at the end of the day, it will be in their hands. It will be their decision if to use these capabilities or not. This is the decision that the government should take within few days after the IDF will clean the tunnels, and now the question, the threat
of the missiles and the rockets will be the one that Israel will have to deal with. Otherwise, there are two options. One is to stop it completely by conquering Gaza, very high price, and a very
Also
long
in the
operation.
international arena, very high price.
It's for us, it's for the Palestinians, international arena, whatever. But maybe at the end of the day, there will not be any other option because Hamas will continue to launch rockets and missiles, and they have another 4,000-5,000 of them. So that might be a situation in which, although the Prime Minister and the government do not want to go into Gaza, there is no any alternative not to go to Gaza if Hamas continue to launch rockets and missiles into Israel. So Israel has to prepare itself. The IDF making all the preparations. This is why we brought in more reserve forces, and the decision should be taken by the cabinet within a few days.
And Mr. Ambassador, do you think Hamas can be eliminated and should be eliminated?
I'm not sure. As I said before, I think we have a similar situation to the one we had in Syria, where everybody hated Bashar al-Assad and wanted him eliminated, but realized ultimately that a weakened Bashar al-Assad with no chemical weapons is better than Al-Qaeda or some of the other elements. I think the same may be true in Gaza. And therefore, I think that the ultimate aim of Israel is to try and use the goodwill that it has over the world, much of it because of its restraint and the Prime Minister's efforts and its agreeing to a ceasefire. And there's an unprecedented coalition today, including Egypt and including Abu Mazen, including Saudis and some of the Gulf states and much of the world, which I think could possibly bring to a similar outcome in Gaza, namely a weakened Hamas that will have to give up its weapons and its tunnels in return for a reconstruction of Gaza and a maintenance of their rule over that piece of land.
I'd like to make a small correction that I'm sure Yaakov didn't mean that. The Israeli Defense Forces have no mission, and never had, and I hope never will, of killing civilians. This is only a result of using civilians as human shields. That may take place, but we certainly do not do it on purpose. This is counter to our culture and counter to our value system. As to the question...
By the way, I more than agree. It's not that we are not aiming to that. We are doing everything
just formulating
that
the
will
words.
not happen. There's no other army in the world that is taking so much effort to avoid civilian casualties. There is now,
on this point,
there is now in
do...
Israel a colonel from the British Army called Richard Kemp, and he said publicly...
He will be here this evening, actually.
Yes, that no one in the history of wars did what the IDF is doing to prevent civilians to be...
Well, on that note, we will end here. We have unfortunately run out of time, Mr. Shafir, Ambassador Gillerman, and Mr. Avigdor. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And we go now to a 2-minute break. Stay tuned for more.
It's very saddening. To see any of these civilian deaths is terribly saddening.
We condemn strongly the rocket attacks.
Egypt have encouraged that, and Israel has accepted that ceasefire proposal. Only Hamas now needs to make the decision.
Welcome back to this I-24 News special edition. With me now is Dr. Jonathan Schechter, a senior advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. To begin, what are the goals of this military operation from Israel's side?
The goals have not changed. Thank you for having me, Meredith. The goals have not changed. The goals are to restore peace and security to the residents of Israel, the peace and security that they deserve. At the same time, we're hitting very hard the terrorist infrastructure in Gaza of Hamas and of the other Palestinian terrorist groups there.
Mm-hmm. And when you started, you said it was just when you started the ground operation, it was just the tunnels. Has it developed further now that you are in a ground operation?
The goals, the overall goal, as I just mentioned, has not changed. It is to disrupt and destroy as much as we can of the terrorist infrastructure, which includes the tunnels. The numbers I saw as of this morning had us discovering, I think it was almost 50 tunnel shafts going to 15 tunnels that lead from Gaza into Israel. Continue to operate against those tunnels, to destroy those tunnels as we find them, and of course continue to work against the rocket fire, which has not stopped.
And how is the Israeli government dealing with the mounting death toll in Gaza? It's hundreds of people dying.
We continue to remain committed to doing everything we can to minimize civilian casualties. Israel, if it could, would avoid all civilian casualties. We don't want to have even one civilian casualty. What we have is a very difficult situation where Hamas has embedded its terrorist infrastructure, for example, its rocket manufacturing, storage, and launching amongst the Palestinian civilian population. The tunnels that we're seeing are built underneath civilian homes. The entrances to the tunnels are under civilian homes. It makes it very difficult to avoid civilian casualties. We're doing everything we can. I'm sure you've heard of the notices that we give, telephone calls, SMS, text messages, leaflets, doing everything we can to get people out of harm's way. And those messages don't just say get out. They say get out and here's where you can go to be safe. And the people who have done that have been safe. Now, what makes this even more difficult is that Hamas has told people to ignore the Israeli warnings, and in some cases we're told have pressured people or threatened people to ignore those warnings, because Hamas very cynically has sees a high Palestinian body count as in its interest. So we have this ironic situation where Israel is doing everything it can to protect its own citizens, which continue to be under indiscriminate rocket fire and these tunnel attacks, these infiltrations, but also trying to minimize Palestinian casualties. And you have Hamas, which is trying to maximize Israeli casualties and Palestinian casualties. It's very difficult.
And regarding the ceasefire negotiations, Hamas has laid out conditions. What are the concessions that Israel is willing to make? How far will Israel go to get a ceasefire?
Of course, I'm not going to negotiate on the air, but what I can tell you is Israel wasn't interested in this escalating from the start, tried to de-escalate, tried to avoid this conflict. After it started, Israel accepted the Egyptian ceasefire proposal, which was endorsed by the United Nations, by the Arab League, by the United States, by the Palestinian Authority. Hamas rejected it. Then after that, you have two requests for humanitarian ceasefires, one by the United Nations, one by the Red Cross. Israel not only accepted those requests, but honored those requests. All of these requests, all of these ceasefire efforts were rejected by Hamas, and fire continued through the ceasefires. So Israel didn't want this to start and has repeatedly tried to end it, but Hamas's response has been continued and even increased rocket fire and, of course, these infiltration attempts through the tunnels.
And what does Hamas need to do in order for Israel to stop its ground operation, or is it too far in at this point?
The key is stopping the rocket fire, and we're going to continue operating until we achieve, as I said, the goal of restoring the peace and quiet to which Israeli citizens are entitled.
And we've heard analysts saying, for instance, that the longer it takes to get the ceasefire that's been being brokered in Egypt is actually possibly an advantage for Israel, because then, as you said, it can possibly carry out the missions to destroy more tunnels. Is Israel hoping that it can buy some time?
As I said, we didn't want this to start, and we've tried repeatedly to stop it. But as long as it's going on, as long as this threat remains, we'll continue to act. What needs to come out of any ceasefire, and what we've called on the international community to do, and the Prime Minister met today with the UN Secretary General, is that Gaza needs to be demilitarized. According to previous agreements, the Palestinians are obligated to demilitarize Gaza. It means there should be no tunnels going underneath the border into Israel. There should be no rockets there. And we've repeatedly called on the international community to step up and to make sure
Who
that...
should demilitarize them? International forces? Abbas's forces? Who should be the ones to?
I think that's one of the things that needs to be discussed and needs to be figured out. But it's a requirement. The Palestinians are obligated to demilitarize Gaza.
But in a conflict, just being devil's advocate here, in a conflict, Israel is so heavily armed. It's such a strong military. Is it fair to insist that Gaza is demilitarized?
Absolutely. That's been part of the peace talks that we've had with the Palestinians for the last 20 years, has been that the result would be looking toward a demilitarized Palestinian state. The Prime Minister has talked about a demilitarized Palestinian state. The Palestinians have already committed to demilitarizing the territories under their control. You have a unity government now based on an agreement between President Abbas and Hamas. It means that President Abbas is the president of Gaza as well, and is obligated to make that happen.
And I want to move now to the issue of the missing body of the soldier. I know Israel hasn't released many details about it. They've been very vague at this point. But Hamas leaders abroad have said that they will agree to a separate deal, not involving the ceasefire deal, a separate deal to release this body of the soldier, allegedly. What does the Israeli government make of this? Would they agree to a separate deal? How do you move forward with this?
Again, you'll forgive me for not negotiating on the air. The truth is, I really don't have anything to add to what the statements that have been put out by the military.
I see. But what has Israel done in the past, for instance? We can speak of past instances where militant groups have had bodies or they've had live soldiers. Mm-hmm. What concessions have been made?
There have been different deals under different times. Right now, just in recent months, there's been discussion within the government. There's commissions set up to evaluate the kinds of things Israel can and cannot and should not exchange. But of course, the details of what will or won't happen is obviously something I'm not going to get into.
I understand. Well, Dr. Schechter, thank you very much for being with us and for speaking with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, as we just mentioned, mystery surrounds the fate of Israeli soldier Oron Shaul, who was caught in a deadly ambush in Gaza Sunday night, in which 7 soldiers were killed. 6 of the fatalities have been identified, and the fate of Shaul, the 7th, remains unclear. Hamas says it captured him, but the IDF says he is listed as missing in action, presumed killed. I-24 News reporter Daniel Campos reports.
On Tuesday morning, the IDF admitted that Sergeant Oron Shaul had gone missing in action after an incident that killed 6 soldiers from the Golani brigades in Gaza City's Sajaya neighborhood, when an anti-tank missile hit the armored personnel carrier they were inside. The IDF presumes Shaul Oron is dead, and some military commanders say he could not have survived the missile hit. On Sunday night, almost immediately after the incident was made public, the first claims of kidnappings appeared on a TV announcement by the Al-Qassam brigades.
Israel has not recognized that it lost one of its soldiers in this operation. How can the enemy hide the disappearance of the soldier Shaul Aaron, number 6092065?
After the announcement, celebrations broke out in Gaza, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and Hebron. Palestinians left their homes and took to the streets to celebrate by handing out candy, setting off fireworks, gunshots, and cheering the armed wing of Hamas, which claimed to have carried out the kidnapping. A shocking celebration that some described as macabre. Now, the celebrations continue on social networks with viral cartoons, photo montage, and a song by Palestinian singer Qasim Najjar, along with a celebration video which has reached almost 500,000 views in less than 12 hours since it was uploaded. The kidnappings of soldiers are a known tool to wage psychological warfare against the Israeli government. The effect on the morale of its military and on the population in general are a form of national trauma. Some experts believe that the body of an Israeli soldier in the hands of Hamas can play a very important strategic role, while others believe that the event might extend the military operations as the IDF will try its best to recover the body without having to negotiate. Usually, kidnappings spawn public debate capable of dividing a country. Hamas has proved them effective. Swapping dead bodies of Israeli soldiers over terrorists jailed in Israeli prison has been used in the past also by Hezbollah, a choice which sparks controversy as relatives of victims killed by terrorists tend to oppose the release of those who murdered their loved ones.
And joining me now in the studio are Dr. Eldad Pardo, an expert on Iran from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. And Amir Oren, the defense and government analyst from Bar-Ilan University. Thank you for being here as well. Now, as we just heard, the missing soldier story, lots of vague reports coming from Israel. But as the report said, it very much lowers the morale here in Israel, and it boosts the morale in Gaza, not just of Hamas, but the people as well. But some are saying that this could expand the operation, that Israel does not want to negotiate on this. What do you think will happen?
This tragic event took place when the armored personnel carrier with probably 7 or 8 soldiers aboard exploded. 2 of the soldiers, 2 additional soldiers, an officer and a radioman, were out of the vehicle when it was hit by an anti-tank missile. And they are recounting what happened now that they are recovering from the wounds. From the story, it appears that none of the soldiers who remained in the vehicle survived. And none, including Sergeant Oron Shaul, left the vehicle after these 2 did, which means that in all probability, Sergeant Shaul did not survive the blast. However, in order to have positive identification, forensic tests must be conducted, and especially in Judaism, if one wants to state unequivocally that a person is no longer alive, you need a much higher standard of proof. This has not been established. So while this work is being done and the tests are not over yet, Hamas is using this unfortunate turn of events from the Israeli point of view to its psychological effect. And as you said, morale has hit a low following the casualties, and this is not going to help morale.
And did Hamas gain what it wanted at this point, even though the soldier was presumed killed?
Well, I think we are not following the Mondial or soccer games here. There is a major war raging across the Middle East between forces of chaos, forces of fanaticism, and the majority of Middle Easterners that we saw them in the streets in the Arab Spring, that really want a major historical turnabout and going to some kind of normalcy, instead of a death cult to life cult. And if we look at it from this perspective, and I'm looking at how it is looked in Iran, how it is looked in Turkey, how it's looked in Iraq, Syria, and across the region, if there are Israeli casualties, if the Israeli people and the Israeli government panic about one person, this is significant because it means that life has value. Moreover, what Israel has shown now, and I think the United people do not speak about it so much, but the United States also have shown it during the Iraq War from 2003 all the way to 2011, that even life-wishing societies and democracies can survive extremely difficult situation, can sustain casualties, and win after that. It's not that Israel has all the magic tricks or the US has all the magic tricks. Everybody makes mistakes. But in the end of the day, one can have a society that is a free society, that wishes to live, that allows everyone to do what they want, to fulfill their life, and still go through the difficult periods. And I think the majority of the Arab world, and we're speaking about the 4th largest internet consumers in the world in Arabic, they are looking towards the future, and this is the right perspective.
And Amir Oren, we did make a mistake in your introduction. You are from the Haaretz newspaper, not from Bar-Ilan University.
Apologies to Bar-Ilan University.
For that, but you are here quite often at the channel, so we're very sorry about that. But Many are saying here in Israel that Netanyahu has no real opposition at this point, even from the left. Do you agree with that? And as the death toll mounts, especially of the soldiers, do you think this will change?
When the guns are roaring, the opposition is usually silent. It is keeping its ammunition dry. And because the Israeli public does not like its opposition to squabble with the leaders during the fighting, lest it hurt the morale of the front, of the troops, and even of the civilian population, we will see once this is over. You can rest assured that Netanyahu will be attacked from the right as well as from the left. He has had a choice last week, which he ostensibly accepted, the ceasefire offer, which Hamas did not. He then had a choice to unilaterally stop the fighting and declare that Israel's goals have been achieved, of course, go on intercepting the rockets, but leave the onus on Hamas. Instead, he chose another option, going into a ground action and hoping or betting that it will not be very costly for Israel. This gamble has failed already. The price has been paid. So now the question is, should Israel persevere and get somewhat deeper, and if not finish the work, at least do some major work in Gaza, or should it cut its losses, find some formula and get out?
And on the flip side, Dr. Pardo, the body count in Gaza is just, it's unreal at this point. And compared to the body count here in Israel, we saw images of the Shujaiya neighborhood that it underwent very intense shelling. We saw bodies strewn across the street, very difficult images for the past few days. Does Netanyahu care? When will the Palestinian body count affect his policy at any point?
I don't know, but I can say for sure that if you look at it from an Iranian perspective, and excuse me for going back to this,
you are an expert in Iran.
This is not the largest number. In Syria, we've seen the beginning of very peaceful demonstrations. After the Iranians started to shoot at them, we are now reaching almost 200,000 people. In the first Iran-Iraq war, we had almost 1 million people dying, and so on and so forth. So the question is not the body count, but what is the intention? And the question for Netanyahu, and this is the major challenge for Israel here, is to understand that we are in the Middle East, and this government should care more about people of the Middle East, and not only follow this rather successful fortress strategy that we've been conducting since 2011. So the question is, what will be the future of Gaza? What will be the future of Judea and Samaria or the West Bank? And how Israel treats its own Arab Palestinian minority? All of these are extremely important challenges to this government.
And bringing it back now to Israel and especially the deaths of IDF soldiers, Sean Carmeli was a soldier who hailed from Texas. He was killed in Gaza on Sunday. And amid fears that his funeral would be sparsely attended, an Israeli soccer club issued a public plea for people to accompany him on his last journey. Here's I-24 News reporter Uri Shapira with his story.
Sean Carmeli was a lone soldier. In Israel, this means a soldier who came from abroad and has no immediate family in the country. Sean's parents returned to Texas after a few years in Israel and left him with his two sisters. On July 20th, the worst happened when it was revealed that Sean was among the 13 soldiers from the Golani Brigade who were killed during the intense fighting in Shujaiya neighborhood in Gaza. Many were concerned that Sean's funeral would be sparsely attended because of his lone soldier status and the fact that some members of his family and friends would be unable to come from abroad to pay their last respects. The solution to this fear came from an unexpected source, the Maccabi Haifa football club, a team Sean admired. The fans posted an exceptional request on their Facebook page, calling on the public to come to Sean's funeral. And 20,000 did. accompanying Sean on his final journey.
I didn't know him personally, but I read he was a lone soldier. I think that every citizen in Israel should respect a lone soldier who came here and died in order to protect our nation.
According to the Warm Home for Every Soldier organization, around 5,800 lone soldiers are currently serving in the Israeli army. Many of them find themselves in difficulties and lacking immediate family support. This community lost 2 soldiers this week, along with Sean, 24-year-old Max Steinberg, who came from Los Angeles and also served in the Golani Brigade.
There's no such thing as a lone soldier in this country. Here everybody stays together and everyone stands with each other.
Sean's is truly a heartbreaking story about a young man who, despite the obstacles in his way, chose to serve his country and lost his life while doing so. His story also resembles, in its way, comradeship of Israeli society. Sean was perhaps a lone soldier, but in his life and his death, he never walked alone.
I mean, this story really captured the hearts and minds of many, 20,000 people at a funeral.
Because it's the convergence of 3 separate phenomena: lone soldiers, bereavement, and social media. Because the call went out on social media for people to come to the funeral, as you said, to accompany Sean on his last journey, and the turnout was really amazing. And Secretary Kerry referred to Sean and to the other soldier in his Cairo press conference today, when he said that 2 Americans were also killed during this fighting. Now, regarding the U.S.-Israeli relationship, one should always remember that that Israel is dependent on the U.S. And President Obama will surely want to be even-handed. He cannot be even-handed between Israel and Hamas, of course, but he will be even-handed between Israel and the Palestinian population, especially in Gaza. Now, you remember the 2 buzzwords of the Obama campaign for the presidency: hope and change. He will try to bring hope to the civilians on either side of the fence, and some change in the political future. So after this is over, he will probably try to reinvigorate the peace process, and it is not certain that Netanyahu would be so glad to see what Obama has in store for him on that front.
Yes, I mean, the Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said today that he really hopes the ceasefire brings about the peace talks again. But is this wishful thinking a little bit? Is it?
I don't know. Maybe I'm pushing the envelope, but I think in a way the fact that Israeli soldiers are fighting in Gaza, they are fighting for uniting the 2 Palestines of Gaza and the West Bank. In a way, this is something that Israel really wanted to keep Hamas there, and it was kind of comfortable to blame Palestinians. We'll have Hamas, and Hamas is going to penetrate to the West Bank and shooting at us from there, and all that. But now everybody understands that Hamas in Gaza is a danger to the Palestinian Authority, it's a danger for Israel, and it's even a much bigger danger to Egypt. Right. So we see here that when push comes to shove, Israel entered Gaza, and it was a very difficult decision. But this may suggest that Netanyahu may be more serious about the 2-state solution than people would credit him.
Well, and speaking of Gaza, we are going to get an update from the Gaza border now from our reporter, Eli Hockenberg. Eli, what's the latest from day 15?
Well, Meredith, the activity on the ground inside the Gaza Strip continues, as the main mission was and remained to destroy the underground terror infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. And as we were talking earlier about the intelligence collected during the time the IDF is spending inside the Gaza Strip, there was a serious development since Operation Pillar of Defense of Hamas, building this underground infrastructure, getting more and more ammunition, long-range rockets, regular rockets. So the entire strategy of Hamas maybe is getting more and more clear to the IDF forces that are inside, collecting more information about what is going on inside the Gaza Strip. And another challenge the forces is now has to deal with is the moral. And maybe one of the best examples is the Golani brigade commander that just got out of the hospital this morning, and by noon he was back with his team inside the Gaza Strip. So the soldiers here are keeping the morale high. They believe that this operation was very much needed, and they believe in their activity. And we can hear these similar statements from their families and from soldiers in other media stations. So the morale, as for now, is still high. The soldiers are very much determined to finish this operation with a great satisfaction of the IDF achievement from the ground activity inside the Gaza Strip. And we will of course keep you updated with any development from here, but we can see and hear all the time IDF activity inside the Gaza Strip right behind me. Meredith.
Thank you, Elia, for these updates. Quick last comment.
You would note that Eli, as the other journalists, is kept outside of Gaza because the IDF spokesperson will not let correspondents accompany the troops and cover the conflict, which is not a very wise decision. And just to round up regarding your question, there is a wave here. A terror wave begets an operation begets a peace process, and the peace process begets a terror wave.
Well, we will certainly see how that ends. Dr. Pardo and Amir Oren, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We are going on another 2-minute short break. Be back soon.
It's very saddening to see any of these civilian deaths is terribly saddening.
We condemn strongly the rocket attacks.
Egypt have encouraged that, and Israel has accepted that ceasefire proposal. Only Hamas now needs to make the decision.
Welcome back. Joining me in studio now are Ron Gerlitz, the co-executive director of the Sikui Organization for the Advancement of Civic Equality. Thank you very much for being here this evening. And Ayub Kara, a former government minister from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Now today, Justice Minister Tzipi Livni said that this operation was unavoidable and there's no chance for a ceasefire now. What do you make of that?
You know, I know the policy of the Tzipi Livni is, of course, of the side that very dominant to make peace, to negotiate to peace. But of course, Israel was not the position or the process that become all this war. You know, Israel did not need this war. They are not do anything to make conflict with the Palestinians. They attacks 3 children before 1 month. They kill him. And this is the case that happening, all what we see now. At last, I think Israel need peace more than any nation, any state. But we must understand in the other side people that they are not need any state here of Jews. This is the case. This is the true. And they speaking about land and two nation, 2 states. This is not the true. The true is in the other side, the organization, the fundamentalism organization. They need that in this area be only Islamization countries. That's what they speak loudly. Abu Mazen is not control this Gaza and around Gaza. He is not dominant in this area. We have a problem in that. We could not going to make any agreement with Abu Mazen if he is not dominant in Gaza. This is the problem that we have now around all this one.
I see. And just moments ago, we would like to announce that red sirens were heard in Tel Aviv. Rockets were fired on Tel Aviv from Gaza. But Mr. Gerlitz, your organization promotes coexistence, believes in coexistence. How would you respond to that?
Related to the ceasefire, I think that today and tonight, and actually since this war began, ceasefire is in the very high interest of Israel. I think that for so many years we tried to have to reach some achievement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict using violent forces, and this simply doesn't succeed. We have never succeeded to reach any significant gain in the relation between Israel and the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza using military operation and using military force. And I think that the only way that we will be able to have I don't even want to say good, but a normal relation between Israel and the Palestinian is through a political settlement between the Israeli government and the Palestinian government. Now, the Palestinian government is now kind of divided because there was the Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. But like a few months ago, there is the united government of the Palestinian in the West Bank and the Hamas in Gaza. And I think that despite the Hamas is a very, I would say, problematic entity, Israel should have welcomed this new government, this united government of the Palestinians, and try to reach some kind of agreement with them. I think that Israel didn't put enough efforts of trying to reach a political settlement with the Palestinians. And time after time, we use the force and we use violent means, and we pay, I mean, both sides pay an enormous, terrible price in the deaths of soldiers and citizens inside Israel, and the deaths of more than 500 Palestinians in Gaza. This is a terrible price that both sides paid, and nothing gained from it. We are again to the same point in which we have to reach a political agreement with the Palestinians, as hard as it sounds in these days. We have no other option, and I think we are going the wrong direction. And I hope that the international community and the internal forces inside Israel and inside the Palestinians will push to a ceasefire as soon as possible.
Should Israel accept the unity government, do you think, Mr. Kara?
I think Israel could accept everything that make the area quietly. With they make all the state in important security life.
And there are sirens over Eilat. We just do want to mention to our viewers, sirens are sounding over the southern city of Eilat. Yes.
Oh, you know, every hours, every 2 hours, we could find the attacks every corner in Israel. They are not need to become and make anything to stop the violence in this area. This is the behavior. This is the problem, because they are not need to become the Israel stay as a Jewish state. They are not needed. This is the problem of this all this war. This is the problem, and the Hamas is speaking loudly around this case. And every when you hear to the news in Arabic, and I know Arabic very well, they speaking loudly in Arabic, different language also between the English and Hebrew. They speak loudly that they are not need anyone that not from the Islam as a state, as a person in this area. Looking about Iraq every day, they sent out all the Christian.
And we are joining now live from Hebron is Maysoon Kowasme, head of Wafa Bureau in Hebron. Maysoon, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
How are people in Hebron reacting to the events in Gaza?
First of all, can you just give me a few seconds to tell the women in Gaza and the children in Gaza, we are so sorry in the war that we can't defend for all of these innocent people and civilian people. And the Palestinians in all over the West Bank are just looking forward that what's going on after this war. Now we are looking for the peace, but now Israel damaged everything. Israel tried and to tell us and to push us, all of us who are believe as a peace, to need the peace, that to go and to international law and to defense to ourselves. We can't do anything now. We can't stop. We can't just looking for the news. Now all the streets are going outside. You can see every places in the West Bank are just bawling, let's say. And the people who are believe that perhaps in the negotiation or we loud our voice. Now we didn't want anything. Just we want to defense for the civilian people, and in any way now, because nobody understand what's happened in the Al-Shuja'iyya massacre. This is what we call now, we want to put to go as a Palestinian people.
Now, Maysoon, how would you react? How are people reacting there? Are they blaming Hamas at all for this conflict? Because Hamas is fighting from within its people in civilian areas.
Hamas now let's say now Hamas defense for the civilian people. Before when the last interview with me, I'm looking forward that perhaps there is a pacification between the Israel and Hamas. But now what's happened? Why we are going from the zero? Usually Israel getting back from the zero each 2 years. Why we try just to build everything after the war in each 2 or 3 years? Why we feel exhausted? We can't now defense to ourselves. Just we try to looking forward what's going tomorrow. We can't thinking. Just to, let's say as I am working with the human rights, I'm looking forward that the Palestinian Authority go to the international court and stand and loud our voice, but that we try to defense for our people as a civilian.
But Maysoon, Israel did try to avoid this ground operation. Israel did not want to go through with this. Hamas was raining rockets on its cities, and the IDF felt like it had no choice. Israelis are also saying this. They're sick of this cycle every few years. How would you respond to that?
Can you repeat it again?
Yes, you said that Palestinians are tired of this cycle every 2 years fighting. Israelis are saying the same thing, and I have to say, in this instance, Israel did not want to go ahead with a ground operation. They tried to restrain as much as they could, but Hamas was firing rockets on their cities and still are.
But you know, each 2 years we don't know why the war are coming. The war are coming. We are looking that let's say before 2 or 3 years, looking for why in 2011 happens the wars, and now Israel say that there is three soldiers are kidnapping in Hebron, and then they are fighting Gaza.
These were three teenagers. I have to correct you. These were not soldiers, Maysoon. These were teenagers on their way home from school. They were not soldiers.
Okay, but they are even a settler or a soldier. We can't, let's say, now we didn't understand why this story happened in
and
this
they were
time.
not settlers as well. I need to correct you on that.
The Palestinian government, why after the reconciliation happened? Why? There is a lot of question now in the street, as I am working in the media, and the people, the normal people are say why something like this happened? Why the international law stopped Israel? Why all the Arab world are looking just for us? Why we are just say that now who are killing the mayor, who are killing are just now a number? Why we didn't want to close this story?
Because Hamas did not accept the initiative by Egypt. Hamas did not accept the ceasefire. It continues to reject ceasefires. Even during humanitarian declared ceasefires, Hamas continues firing onto Israel. It shows no sign of wanting to negotiate at this point.
Okay, let me tell you something. I didn't defense about Hamas. I'm just defense about the civilian people. That's because I believe that we are a human being and we want to just live a normal life. We hope that there is we want to close this paper. Let's say this type of in our history. Let's say why the international law are just looking for us now and just put a picture and say we upset about what Israel happened.
And Maysoon, you know,
why everything are voting for the
we
for
need
the
to
people?
finish it. We need to finish it there, Maysoon. We do need to finish the conversation there, but you know, there's no disagreeing with you with regard to civilians being killed. Everyone really does want peace and quiet in the region, and hopefully that will come soon with a ceasefire and possible peace talks. Thank you very much, Maysoon, for joining us. What do you make of these words?
I want to make a point about the issue of no choice. You asked her if this escalation of this war is a no choice in Israel, for Israel. And I think one of the most dangerous concepts that settled down very strongly in the Israeli society is the concept that we have no choice but to fight the Palestinian. This is the big success of the Israeli government.
And I must correct you there, because Israel is fighting Hamas. Israel's not fighting Palestinians.
I want to give you my perspective.
Okay.
I think that one of the biggest failure of the Israeli Asbara outside, that it succeeded inside, and we are developing generation after generation of young Israelis that believe that we have no choice but to fight the Palestinian and their leadership, whether it be this leadership or the Hamas. Now, I'm not in favor of the Hamas from no way and no aspect, okay? And I'm against what they are doing, and of course I'm against killing of soldiers and killing of citizens in Israel and everything. But the concept of no choice channels, okay, the efforts and the budget and the big efforts of the Israeli society in trying to find a military solution to the conflict. While if we were invested the same efforts in trying to work with the reconciliation government and in other means with the Palestinian and with the Hamas in Gaza, we might have succeeded, and we didn't try enough. This is the point. We go to war after war in 2009, in 2011, and now in 2014. We go to war after war. We don't get anything from those wars. We lose a lot of soldiers, a lot of citizens in Gaza, instead of putting much more efforts to trying to get to a political agreement.
And we do go now live to Tel Aviv, where our correspondent Shachar Pellet is standing by at a rally that calls for ending the war. Shachar, what are you seeing? What are the messages being said?
Yes, good evening. We're here in the center of Tel Aviv in Rabin Square, and as the operation in the Gaza Strip continues, and only a few moments ago we've witnessed another interception of the Iron Dome of a rocket fired over the greater Tel Aviv area. Behind us you can see a rally called Artists Against the War, an emergency action calling for poets, philosophers, filmmakers, musicians, artists from all sectors and kinds to come and rally against the violence, the ongoing violence. And right across the barrier here, others have come to protest against this demonstration in favor of the actions of the Israeli Defense Force. With us is Ilan Volkov, a musician who is participating in the rally of artists against the war. Ilan, what can you tell us about this demonstration? Why are you here, and aren't you afraid of widening the gap between sectors in the Israeli public?
I mean, we're still a democracy, so we can still voice our different opinions, hopefully in a peaceful way. I mean, there has been about 5-6 demonstrations in Tel Aviv since the operation started, and some of them have been quite violent because there have been quite a few right-wingers have been actually hitting people and trying to assault people violently. That has actually stopped now because there's police here, and that's kind of much more safe. Israeli government, as an Israeli, I object to what they're doing for many, many years, and I think we're going in the wrong direction. I have great concern for everybody here, including the soldiers that are fighting and including the civilians that are dying on both sides for no... I mean, I don't see really a future for this. I think it will continue like this for many decades until both sides decide that they had enough and they can see another way to solve their problems.
Thank you very much. As you can see, activists in Tel Aviv are trying to voice their concerns over what is going on in the operation and still try and continue with a dialogue and not violence here in the center of Israel. Back to you.
Thank you, Shachar, very much for these updates. Now, I just have to say there's so much irony there in an anti-war protest as a rocket is intercepted right above it. It just shows the complexities of the situation, doesn't it?
The situation is complex.
I think people did not understand. Israel did not need this war. They are not accept anything to start and to move to any war. But at last, the problem of Israel is with Hamas, is not with the Palestinian. This the Prime Minister every day speak with Abu Mazen. There's no problem. He is the legitimate leadership of the Palestinian.
And,
but
I'm
Hamas,
sorry to interrupt. There are rockets being sirens being sounded now. Rockets are being fired at the cities of Gadara and Ashdod, southern and central cities.
And the important thing, they use the Hamas use everything and to make to attack Israel, to attack the civilians people here. They are not looking if they are civilians or soldiers. They are not care. They send to all the cities booms and everything, and they not stop only with to fighting the army of Israel. Of course, the case of that, they believe absolutely they are not need here Jews. This is the problem. They speak it in Arabic every day. The problem is not the Palestinian. The problem that Hamas become more and more dominant. In this area of Gaza, no one could fighting Hamas, including that Egypt and the other Arabian states. They want to stop this violence against the Palestinian also, not against Israel also. They are so fundamentalism. They all the leadership against the Hamas in the Arabian states, because they know that no way to go to any peace agreement if they are dominant in this area.
And I'm wondering, you just mentioned how many of the Arab states are against Hamas. How will Egypt's new administration affect the negotiations, for better or for worse?
Look, Egypt must be in the front of any connection between Israel and, of course, Hamas and the Palestinian. Egypt, if happening something that I could proud that Egypt now more and more dominant in this area. In the past, till 1967, Egypt was the leadership of Gaza. We are not occupied any state there. And of course, Egypt was the dominant in this area. If Egypt become back and they are the police or the dominant organization in Gaza, no problem, be in a few days in Gaza. Because
look, I'm not a supporter of the Hamas. I want to say it.
You've said this a few times now.
Extremely clear. But as long as the situation of the Palestinians in Gaza, which they are now under the ruling of the Hamas, unfortunately for them and unfortunately for Israel, as long as the situation of the Palestinians in Gaza is so bad, there is no way that there will be good and normal life for Israelis in the south and in the center. As you say, the rockets are fired on Israel as we speak, and for the Palestinians in Gaza. Gaza was and is still under siege for the recent years because of Israel and because of Egypt. Okay, the blame shouldn't be put only on Israel. The blame should be put also on Egypt. The borders of the Gaza are generally closed. I'm not speaking about the war. I'm speaking about generally speaking. And Israel controls the entrance to Gaza, and Israel controls the export of goods from Gaza. And there is no way that the Palestinians in Gaza will live in such a bad condition and will have a normal relationship with Israel. This will not work. Either we want the Hamas or we don't want the Hamas. This will simply not work.
And we do now go to our reporter, Jonathan Regev in Ashkelon. Jonathan?
Yes, Meredith, a relatively quiet day in Ashkelon, quiet for the compared with the last few days. We're speaking about 2 sirens here that were heard in the morning. Ever since, it's been quiet, something that the city of Ashkelon has not seen for the past 2 weeks. This was one of the most bombarded places in Israel, but for the past day, it's been relatively quiet. People have used this to try and go on with their normal lives as much as they can. But obviously, we have seen Hamas rockets being fired to places further into Israel, like Ashdod, like the center, and therefore no one here is under the illusion that all this fire is over yet.
I see. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for these updates from Ashkelon. And as with every Israeli military conflict, opinions are divided and passions are high among the population, especially among Israeli Arab citizens. I-24 News reporter Daniel Roth has more.
Yesterday, during a day-long general strike in Palestinian communities, thousands gathered in Nazareth in Israel's north to protest the growing carnage in Gaza.
Who are protesting about all the occupation that Israel is doing in Gaza.
And though clashes with police ensued, a similar protest in Jaffa was calmer. But nearby, a group of right-wing Israelis organized a counter-protest where participants chanted "Death to Arabs," among other things. For Palestinian citizens of Israel, the issue can be quite complex. Clashes between citizenship and identity come to the fore as brutal images make their way out of Gaza. Meanwhile, anti-war protests have also been organized in other Israeli cities such as Tel Aviv and in the West Bank in places such as Ramallah.
Enough is enough. We need our freedom. We need our independent state. We need the implementation of the international resolutions. Don't take resolutions one after another and put them on the shelves. Implement them now.
Protests against the growing body count and violence between Israel and Hamas have been taking place the world over, and some have even gotten out of hand.
And Mr. Carr, we just saw the right-wing demonstrations. Would you agree that the right-wingers tend to get more violent as they feel very nationalistic? I mean, we've seen in these demonstrations in Tel Aviv just this past week, right-wingers actually physically beat left-wingers calling for peace.
Look, the Arabian in Israel, they understand very well and use the democracy life, absolute it. They use it. They are not found themselves in any corner, in all this area, in any states, that they have this human right and democracy life. And we found ourselves, they are talking about states, about the future, but the truth is not like that. There are you could not go to any negotiation with Hamas. Hamas is the leadership of the Palestinian now. They maybe the 10% from the Palestinian, but maybe they are 20%, but he is the dominant. He occupied the road. Everything in the Palestinian Authority, including that Shechem, Nablus, and other cities of the Palestinian. That is mean there's no way to go to any solution to make any peace agreement with them. They are not occupied anything. They are not need anything. So the people here, I agree with all of them that they are need states. Okay, but who is the leadership of these states? We left all the area of Gaza in 2005. We lived to the border. They continue to attack Israel. We are in the border of 1967 now in the south. What is the problem? We left there. If they fighting us in this side, I could maybe occupy it. But they are attacks Israel from border of 1967. What is the problem with that?
And just briefly, we do have to wrap up. But Mr. Gerlitz, as we said, your organization promotes coexistence, and it's interesting to hear the Arab-Israeli voice at this time, because obviously many have friends, possibly family members in Gaza, but at the same time here in Israel, they're coming under rocket fire. So what is that position?
I think there are two things that are dominant the relation between Jewish and Arabs inside Israel. One thing that the violent and racist attacks against the Arab citizens got severely higher in the recent months. It became very common that Arabs were attacked either verbally or even physically.
Well, especially Mohammed Abu Khader, who was killed following the slaying of the Israeli
course, this was the murder of Mohammed Abu Khader, but I'm speaking about people that were attacked in the place they work, in public transportation, and many Arab citizens of Israel in this day afraid to go in the public space in Israel. That's a very, very problematic phenomena, which brings me a big shame as a Jewish Israeli, and is very dangerous for the relation between Jewish and Arabs inside Israel. But I want to make another point, which is an unspeakable point in the Israeli discourse this now, that the war against Gaza, the people that are being attacked there are the people of the Arab citizens of Israel. And they found themselves, that they see the picture of the kids in Gaza which are being killed, that's the kids, like their families, their people, and that's bringing the situation to a very fragile and dangerous situation.
We do need to wrap it up, Mr. Gerlitz. Thank you very much for your comments, as well as you, Mr. Carr. Thank you very much for being here. We are going on a short break. Join us, and we are showing pictures of Gaza and Tel Aviv live right now. Thank you for watching.
It's very saddening. To see any of these civilian deaths is terribly saddening.
We condemn strongly the rocket attacks.
Egypt have encouraged that, and Israel has accepted that ceasefire proposal. Only Hamas now needs to make the decision.
Welcome back to this I-24 News special edition. With me now in studio, our retired Colonel Richard Kemp, the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. And also Ashraf al-Ajrami, former Palestinian Authority Minister. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, as a retired colonel, what type of warfare is going on in Gaza right now in this ground operation? It's a very, urban warfare is a very, very difficult place to fight.
It's probably the toughest that we ask of our soldiers, because there are such short ranges, there are so many opportunities for an assaulting force in particular to be surprised by those people who are defending against them. There's the opportunity for improvised explosive devices to be placed, for booby traps, for sniping, a great deal of cover for snipers even at short range, for suicide bomb attacks, and pretty much any form of assault you can imagine. So these operations tend to be costly in terms of casualties on both sides, and also require huge amounts of logistic support. Very difficult, of course, given the nature of this terrain, to maintain surveillance in order to give the infantry on the ground the opportunity to see where the enemy is.
And it also has a huge toll on civilians as well, who just happen to be living in these areas.
If there are civilians there, yes, of course, there is a potential for civilians to get killed. And I think this happens in all forms of urban conflict where civilians are present. It's an absolute tragedy when this happens, in particularly in this type of situation. And I think the most tragic aspect of this operation is the way in which Hamas have deliberately positioned civilians in areas around their weapon systems, and deliberately, and in some cases violently, force those civilians to remain in place while attacks take place, particularly air attacks. And of course, the IDF, when they know there are civilians present, abort an operation and do not carry out the attack. But in some circumstances, they have little option. But I think that is the biggest tragedy of this, the way that Hamas is conducting themselves in such a despicable way and carrying out what amounts to war crimes.
And Mr. al-Ajrami, what is the Palestinian Authority reaction to the events going on in Gaza right now?
Unfortunately, there are many civilians are killed every hour, maybe every 5 minutes. We are speaking about more than 620 Palestinians, more than 70% of them are civilians, about a quarter of them children, and about more than 50 women also were killed in these attacks. So sometimes you see that a whole building of 24 residents are under the demolition of their houses because the Israeli attacks. So it is very hard for the Palestinian Authority to bear it. It is unbearable. So we want to stop this fire because it is not Israeli soldiers against Palestinian fighters and they killed each other. They kill each other. There are civilians under these houses everywhere, in the streets, in the mosques, in even the United Nations schools were attacked here. Mm-hmm. I think it is very difficult to the President Mahmoud Abbas and to the Palestinian Authority to see what the Israelis do is something that a protective action against the Palestinians who launch rockets against Israel. It is something.
And we will revisit this, but a rocket which landed near Ben Gurion International Airport southeast of Tel Aviv this morning has led the Federal Aviation Authority to issue a notice informing U.S. airlines that they are prohibited from flying to or from for a period of 24 hours. Air France and Lufthansa have also suspended flights, and other airlines may follow suit. Meanwhile, Operation Protective Edge has hit the Israeli tourism industry hard. Estimates say that the war has cost the industry around $100 million. I-24 News correspondent Shachar Pellet has more.
The ongoing Operation Protective Edge is taking a psychological toll on Israel and a financial one as well. 30% of tourists who plan to visit Israel in July and August have cancelled their trips, according to the Israel Hotel Association. Others are checking the country's cancellation fee policy or are leaving earlier than planned. An estimated 25% of the tourists vacationing in Israel who have been caught in rocket alerts and Iron Dome interceptions have quickly left the country. The director of the Israel Incoming Tour Operators Association, Ami Etgar, notes the difference between now and earlier this year.
The first 6 months, there was an increase of about 20% with the tourists that came to Israel. It's about 35% increase from Germany. It's more than 20% from Russia, from Europe all over, including France, England, all over Europe. And all the bookings ahead of us for the second part of the year was very, very high.
According to the association, pre-booked reservations in Israel for the coming 9 months totaled $750 million, but this figure is gradually dwindling.
It's a loss of about $100 million cancellations from about $500 million that we hope that will materialize till the end of the year.
The Gaza violence is dragging the Israeli tourism industry down, but is not putting it completely out of business. However, significant economic damage might continue even after the operation ends. The summer season, heavily dependent on foreign tourism, might well be over before the memory of what appeared to be a war zone fades. However, some visitors are here to stay.
We feel very safe. The Iron Dome has done a great job. We feel prepared when the siren goes off, and it's not affecting our daily lives here.
Still, there's no sense of panic in the Israeli travel industry yet. But as the Gaza Strip rockets reach even the northern city of Haifa, almost the entire country has become a potential target, ruining any vacation mood.
And joining us in studio is Hilik Bar, a member of the Israeli parliament for the opposition Labour Party. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, what do you make of the current ground operation, and do you think Israel should have done anything differently?
No, actually, we waited, some people say too long, with the ground operation. The opposition understood, like the coalition, that we have no other choice but to get in order to take care of these tunnels that from inside of them they are launching hundreds and thousands, actually almost 2,000 rockets in less than 2 weeks. And believe me, I think that the entire government and the opposition would be happy to continue to attack from the air or from the sea and not to put in danger our soldiers, but we have no other choice. If, again, we want not to hurt civilians in Gaza or to create a massive damage, and we don't want that.
So you're saying that the opposition supports Netanyahu's decision 100%?
Netanyahu and the IDF, yeah, until that point, definitely.
And Mr. Ajami, I'm curious, does the Palestinian Authority put blame on Hamas for this?
No, we don't want Hamas to launch rockets against Israel, but the last operation, the last war, we see that the Israelis they started it because of accusing Hamas of the kidnapping and murdering the 3 Israeli kids in Hebron. And until this moment, the Israelis didn't arrest these people who are responsible for this operation, and the Hamas leadership.
But they are looking
denied,
for them, correct?
Yes,
they're
okay,
still
yes.
at
But
large?
Hamas leadership denied any responsibility of Hamas of this operation. So the Palestinian Authority said, and President Mahmoud Abbas, until there is a proof that Hamas leadership is responsible and there was a decision from Hamas leadership to do this operation, we cannot blame Hamas. Because after that, the Israelis invaded some places in the West Bank, and after that, the attacks in Gaza Strip and the rockets. Even the first 3 days, Hamas didn't launch any rocket against the Israelis.
That's not true, of course.
It is true.
I want to remind you, Ashraf, that also before kidnapping and killing brutally our 3 boys, Hamas and other organizations in Gaza did launch, not in this capacity, rockets, but just launching rockets, it's not the thing. Hamas supported the kidnapping, said that they should kidnap more, and right now the situation is that we have a terror organization that I know that even you don't like them, that manage and have his own state, and this situation cannot happen.
Now, I'm curious to know what the British Army's reaction would be to this, all these events.
Well, the reality, of course, is that Hamas have been carrying out rocket attacks against Israel for many months now. And Israel has shown, in my opinion, in my professional opinion as a former British soldier, have shown extraordinary restraint in not moving in much greater force to deal with the threat of rockets being thrown indiscriminately at their civilian population.
How would they react?
They would react, well, I can tell you how they reacted when it happened to them. We had rockets fired at us once, and that was in 1944. And we reacted by sending 600 bombers to destroy the workshops that were manufacturing them. And we then dropped 2,000 tons of explosives on the launch sites. We didn't pay any attention to civilian casualties then. The important thing was that we stopped the rockets coming in and killing our people. Obviously, it's different circumstances, and it's quite right that Israel should do what it's doing, which is to show extraordinary restraint in attacking the Palestinian Hamas terrorists who are carrying out rocket attacks against their civilian population. They are showing restraint. They're showing great restraint. They're showing more restraint, in my view, than any other armed force has ever shown. But we mustn't forget what Hamas is trying to achieve here. They're trying to do, and they're succeeding, by the way. They're trying to get people like Ban Ki-moon, the President of the United States, to condemn Israel for being too violent in its reaction. They're trying to get this kind of world condemnation and stir hate up against Israel. This is part of their plan by using human shields to protect their rocket launch systems. There's no question of who started this. It's not Israel. It's nothing to do with the 3 kidnapped boys. This is an act of aggression, a continuing act of aggression by Hamas. That is the fact. Whether anyone says anything different is immaterial. That is the fact.
And how would you respond to that?
I think that they ignore the reason of the violence here, because the main reason of violence is the occupation of the Palestinian territories. When the Israelis did one-sided withdrawal from Gaza Strip, they strengthened Hamas movement in Gaza, and they contribute to this atmosphere and the situation in Gaza Strip.
But the people elected Hamas.
Yes, of course, because after the one-sided withdrawal from Gaza Strip, people thought that Hamas, with its resistance, gained Gaza Strip and made the Israelis withdraw one-sided from Gaza Strip. And unfortunately, we begged the Prime Minister at that time, Ariel Sharon, to do it as a part of agreement with the Palestinian Authority and to do it gradually that the Palestinian Authority can control the situation in Gaza Strip. They didn't want to hear us, they didn't want to cooperate with us, and they caused this strong Hamas and Al-Jihad the Islamic movement in Gaza Strip, and this situation of violence. We wanted to do it as a part of the peace process that must be continued in the West Bank, and we can reach the two-state solution. Without reaching a peaceful solution, this violence will remain and follow us all the time. This is the main point. Until this moment, even the Israelis, if they invade Gaza Strip, the IDF invades Gaza Strip and stand everywhere, the violence will remain.
But I'm intrigued as to know why you support Hamas rocket fire, because you said you don't blame Hamas, and not blaming Hamas is supporting Hamas.
Believe me, they're blaming Hamas. I just can't say it because Allow me, Ashraf, just to say a few words. First, I agree with Ashraf about one thing. Two-state solution is the only solution that will be good for Israel and for the Palestinian people, Hamas, and definitely the Fatah. But Hamas have to take the decision that Fatah took many years ago, and this is not to make a violent resistance against Israel, but make it in a dialogue. Ashraf knows very well that I'm very active in a dialogue with Abu Mazen and dialogue with the Palestinian Authority, because this is the only way to negotiate. But Hamas is not there. Hamas got the Gaza Strip, and by the way, I didn't support the disengagement. I thought that the Hamas shouldn't get it, but he get it to manage it for the benefit of the people. Look what he did in numbers. Just in the last 2 weeks, 1,900 rockets. In less than 15 years, 170 rockets on Israeli civilian targets. 800,000 tons of cement were used not to build schools or mosques or hospitals, but to build tunnels in order to do just one simple thing, be able to launch one or two successful attempts to kill and butcher Israeli children, and they did it before. Tens of millions of dollars that they got from a lot of the Gulf country and Qatar's. What did they do with everything? They invested it not in the citizens, but in terror and in aim to kill the Israeli people. And this is why we understand what President Abu Mazen needs to understand, is that Hamas is not a partner for peace. If Hamas want to invest in Gaza, want to make their life better, we can help him. Dismantle yourself from the rockets, dismantle yourself from power, be a partner to negotiation, and then maybe Israel will consider to talk to you as a legitimate party.
But you supply Hamas with oxygen all the time by killing civilians. If you see the situation in Gaza Strip, Hamas is a very higher...
we don't kill civilians. You heard our British colleague here telling you what other countries would have done before and would have done probably if they would have thousands of rockets on their citizens. Believe me, I was in the IDF.
Yeah,
I'm still an officer in the IDF. I'm telling you, the IDF is not aiming to kill civilian people.
More than 70% of the people who were killed in Gaza Strip are civilians.
Because the coward Hamas terrorist is hiding behind the citizens.
This is not reason to kill them.
No, what do you mean? When they shoot missiles from hospitals, from churches and mosques, from schools, from home of private people, what do you want Israel to do? Just let them launch rockets?
Ashraf, how are we supposed to deal with Hamas?
I think that if you want to deal with Hamas...
As militants, correction.
I don't know how to deal with this because it is very difficult. The Israelis can't win this battle, and the Hamas can't win this battle. We will return to the 0 point after this, and we will return to this point after maybe a few months or a few years, if there is no peaceful solution for this conflict. The violence will remain with us forever.
And Richard, back to the military perspective, how do you dismantle a terror group? Can you dismantle a terror group?
I think in this circumstance you can, but it's very, very costly. And I think if
what would that involve?
If the IDF decided to go all the way right to the bitter end and to inch by inch to attack and destroy Hamas, then it could be done, but it would be a costly operation. We've experienced the same kind of fighting in Afghanistan, and you know what the outcome has been there. There's been a large number of casualties from the West, many, many more civilian casualties killed there than ever have been killed here, mostly by the Taliban.
In a 10-year war as well.
In an over 10-year war, which is far from over. They don't win the war. No, you're right. They don't win the war, and ultimately, there's got to be if there's going to be an end to the slaughter, there has got to be some kind of force put on or pressure put onto Hamas to get them to stop what they're doing. Now that pressure could come militarily eventually with a lot of cost, or it could come internationally. It could come from the diplomatic community. I think the biggest problem that we face is the insistence on the world community drawing some kind of moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. We're talking about a Western liberal democracy here trying to defend itself, and a terrorist group designated by the European Union, by the United States and other countries in the world. We're talking about, and people condemning what Israel are doing. In my experience, as I mentioned earlier on, Israel are doing the best they can to minimize casualties. The only way this is going to stop is by Hamas stopping firing rockets.
But they can't make Hamas weaker. The problem is every time they supply Hamas with the support of the people, supply Hamas with the credibility in the Arab and the Muslim world, and they get money.
Even
and
we
they
supply
get,
Hamas. Ashraf, Hamas is not part of our people. It's part of
you
your people.
can isolate Hamas.
You should help us do it. Going to unity government with a terror organization and not dealing with Israel as a government who is not fighting Israel via terror but via dialogue. This is unfortunately President Abu Mazen decided to do. You should throw Hamas from the government. You should come to us together with the Arab League and say we are talking with Israel over a dialogue, non-violent dialogue like Hamas. Hamas is not part of the game until he dismantles himself from terror, and then we will dismantle Hamas not only from its army capability, but also diplomatically and morally and theologically. And you can help us do it, but you don't have the strong will to do it.
We wanted this. President Mahmoud Abbas, when established the unity government with Hamas, Hamas went towards Abu Mazen. Hamas accepted all Abu Mazen's conditions.
It is not true. They said it. They said
no.
They said
this is true. It is.
Did they accept the existence of Israel?
No. This is not.
Did they accept peaceful means to talk with Israel?
No. We have Israeli parties who don't accept the existence of the Palestinian people, like the Jewish Home and others.
But they don't shoot rockets on you.
Okay. We want Hamas to be engaged and integrated in the Palestinian political leadership. And Hamas did a very positive step because Hamas is very weak, and Hamas...
But it seems that Hamas doesn't want to be integrated.
They want, because they want legitimacy of President Mahmoud Abbas and the Arab world.
But they want salaries from the Palestinian Authority.
No, there is a problem in Gaza Strip after closing the tunnels between Egypt and Gaza Strip. Hamas in a very bad situation because the major incomes from the tunnels and other support from Iran and other countries are stopped totally, and Hamas in a very bad situation. Because of that, Hamas became more moderate. Hamas went towards Abu Mazen. Hamas accepted all the conditions of Abu Mazen to be in this united...
You are not that naive to think that he became moderate by launching thousands of rockets, building more rockets capability, invest in tunnels instead of the people.
When Hamas
we will accept him when he will do what Fatah did. many years ago, and this is to say, and what Abu Mazen, and I salute Abu Mazen for this, to say, we will not dialogue with Israel via rockets and via suicide bombers. We will make a peaceful dialogue. This is the true change
in
that
that
Hamas
regard, do you
needs to
find
do.
that Abbas is a true partner for peace?
I think that Abbas is a good partner for peace. He's not a perfect partner. He's not a great Zionist. Okay, he don't like us, but we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. President Abu Mazen proved for 8 years that a non-violent resistance to Israel is made Ramallah a developed city that people can live fair life and negotiate with Israel and with other countries in the region toward two-state solution. We had a lot of achievement on the two-state solution. There is a lot of accords. I think that the future Palestinian-Israeli agreement is already written, 90% of it. This is a reason of many, many years of dialogue that President Olmert and President Barak and Prime Minister Netanyahu made with Abu Mazen and his former Yasser Arafat. But this is after Fatah decided that he will no longer be a terror group. And this change Hamas didn't do yet. And this change we and you should demand from Hamas to do if we want to be a legitimate party in the region.
But it is a process.
Don't do discounts to them.
It is, President Mahmoud Abbas wants to get Hamas in his circle, in the moderate circle. And
as a terror organization or as a political party?
No, as a political. But we can't get rid of the situation of Gaza Strip in one step. It is a process. We want Hamas to go gradually, to be moderate, to be part of the political leadership, and the President Mahmoud Abbas continues the negotiation with the Israeli side, and when there is a peaceful agreement, Hamas will accept the decision of the majority of the Palestinian people in any referendum.
Ashraf, just answer me. Do you know any other political party in the world, or in the Palestinian Authority, or in Israel, or in any other part in the world that holds an army and missiles and aiming to kill civilian people?
We don't want it.
Not even the right wing in Israel, and not the left wing in Israel, and not otherwise. Only Hamas. He's not a legitimate political party.
But it is a Palestinian fact. We can't ignore Hamas. Hamas controls Gaza Strip. Hamas, the second party in the Palestinian political map. It is something that we must deal with it with a very reasonable way. It is not just like to throw Hamas out and to see we can get rid of this situation. We must bring Hamas to the moderate circle of the political making. And
I want the same, but the condition should be that he will become a political party and not a terror group. And if he will dismantle itself from its capability to fire rockets and kill people, and from his will to exterminate the state of Israel, then he will be a legitimate party, which he's not right now, and you shouldn't make discount to them on this regard.
And I want to ask a question to Richard, because as you said, if Hamas does dismantle eventually, can that be trusted? Because as we saw, Israel, there was a report this week that Israel destroyed weapons being stored in Sudan, and this isn't the first case weapons, headed to Gaza. How can that be trusted? How can that be a secure deal?
Well, I believe whatever happens, Iran, who's got their hand behind a great deal of what happens in this area, Iran will not be happy with a Hamas that is incapable of attacking Israel, and Iran will do its best to try and find a way of achieving that. Therefore, it comes down to a number of things. First of all, of course, Israel maintaining its own security around the border areas, some kind of guarantee in relation to the border with Egypt. And the international community's support to pressurize Hamas and also to interdict the provision of weapons from Iran. Iran, of course, is a very malignant influence in everything that happens here.
Well, we will end on that note. Colonel Kemp, Ashraf Al-Ajami, and Hilik Bar, thank you all for being here this evening. And that does wrap up this special edition here on I-24 News. Thank you very much for watching.